Okay, great. Welcome everyone. I am Nthiga, the Regional Director, Eastern and Southern Africa with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, also known as HOT. As HOT, we aim and work towards building a map of the world that is free, editable, and accessible to everyone. And I'm very proud and pleased to be working with NYU and CIC and the rest of the panel today on the transformative power of open source apps and tools. So this is one of the areas or technologies that are growing exponentially, and open source tools and apps have become a movement with organizations and communities using these technologies to solve social, economic, and political challenges. So today's panel will explore the dynamics of open source apps and tools and how they are opening up collaboration in crisis response and peace building. And before we kick off, we have a powerful team to talk about this. We have Daniel Odongo, who's the Director of Implementation at Ushahidi. He's very passionate about making digital tools work for people. And he identifies with and supports a number of community outreach and engagement initiatives in Africa. We also have Romeo Ronald, who's a founder of OpenStreetMap South Sudan. As a podcaster, Romeo has also used Audacity, an open source tool to help refugees in Uganda and girls in Juba to develop a strong form of expression and learn storytelling skills via podcasting. We also have John Otunga, Program Manager with the Sentinel Project, past winner of the Commonwealth Digital Challenge Award, and has also spoken and written about ICT for Peace in different platforms, and also overseeing a lot of work in Kenya, South Sudan, Somalia, and DRC. And finally, we'll have Solomon Opio, who's a technology community lead at the Innovation Village, a ThinkPad for innovators and entrepreneurs who are solving most pressing problems using technology. And so to kick us off, I'll start off with Daniel. Daniel, maybe you can give us an overview of where open source tools and apps sit within the crisis response and peace building spectrum. And also, what does the data really tell us about the use of open source apps and tools?
Thank you very much, Monica. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Odongo. I'm the Director of Implementation at Ushahidi. Ushahidi is an organization, first of all, that's born out of the post-election violence that broke out in Kenya in 2008 after the general elections whose results were contested. A lot of what was happening on the ground was underreported or not reported at all. And the founders of Ushahidi created a platform for people to be able to share their first-hand experiences via text, email, SMS, and web. This platform empowered ordinary citizens to document violence in their communities and also be able to share information globally. So our flagship product, the Ushahidi platform, is an open source crowdsourcing tool that helps with large-scale data collection, organization, and analysis to inform response and decision making. And over the last 12 years, it's been used, in various categories of social impact, notably crisis response, human rights protection, good governance, and environmental justice more than 2,000 times. So making this platform, from the learnings I'll share from Ushahidi, making this platform open source was deliberate to make it accessible for anyone, anywhere in the world, and in doing so, it was lowering barriers to the use of technology. And being able to reach over 200,000, to have more than 200,000 deployments, reaching people in over 160 countries, is not something that would have happened if this tool was only made in one language, say English, or if the tool was not open source. So the beautiful thing about open source systems or software is that it's generative by nature. It provides a framework or skeleton upon which different people anywhere can build on top of and even be able to adapt to their local contexts. So it allows these people to take these tools, make them their own, and use them in ways in which we could never imagine without having to actually start making them from scratch. So people around the world have adapted to Ushahidi for their use cases without having to apply, a one-for-all formula. I think the learnings of Ushahidi are something that we can share within the context of open source tools and apps that have been most useful for different people across Africa and the world as a whole. Thank you, Monica. Monica,
your thoughts on, sorry, yes, sorry about that. So Solomon, your thoughts on this, please jump in on what you're seeing or experiencing when it comes to the use of open source tools and apps, and where they sit within the crisis response and peace building sector.
All right, thank you very much, Monica. I must say, this is a very exciting topic that we are discussing today. I come from a background where we basically look at supporting innovations around use of tools, apps that people are developing, and supporting startups. And just to introduce the Innovation Village, just like Monica mentioned earlier on, we are supporting innovations. We are supporting technologists that and startups that are trying to solve the most pressing challenges using technology. So first of all, we see that of all the technologists that we have hosted, startups that we have hosted and supported, in most cases, when you look at Africa in general, we have a number of platforms which may be paid for. So the most interesting part of open source tools is that anyone is free to use at any time, and it can be modified. So we see that a number of innovators tend to use the open source tools, and also the support for that is one that whenever we have these open source tools being used by innovators and technologists, you find that there is always support, and so that makes it easily usable compared to these other platforms. Yes, they may have support, but then when we are given when we have something open that is used by everyone, then the community is bigger. So in terms of supporting in peace building and the initiative of peace building, I would say in the first place, when you look at, I'll pick an example of Uganda. We have had a lot of conflicts. We have hosted several refugee communities, and if I'm to go to, if I'm to look at that if I'm to pick an example of a settlement where we worked in Uganda, by that time I was working with Outbox Technology Hub. So a lot of we have so many people who are coming from places, and in the first place, I mean, you get to a place, they have come to a community, refugees have come to a community where they do not, I mean, you do not know your neighbor, you don't know what your neighbor is going through, and we end up having so many conflicts. And with all these settlements landing in several places, I must say it was my first time around that period when we engaged with these refugees that we saw things related to conflicts in the settlements where we did not expect to see things around that. So I would say, having engaged with them, we begin seeing a place where conflicts, having to begin resolving conflicts, becomes a very big part of the community. That therefore called for several applications and initiatives that would help resolve conflicts. So I would say it's a growing area in that area. I mean, in the field of peace building and conflict resolution, unlike what we would have seen in the past.
Okay, thank you for that. And maybe I'll jump on to Ronald. When it comes to South Sudan and Juba and some of the work that you do around peace building, what tools are you using in terms of the open source tools and open source apps, and how are you really applying them practically, for example, in the peace building context?
Yeah, so my name is Ronald. I'm from the OpenStreetMap community here in South Sudan, and as well as I've been working in the refugee camps for quite a while. So open source tools play a very fundamental role to me in the peace building context. So I want to speak it in two ends, and that is like from the mapping side, and then together with also from the other side of the podcasting and audio storytelling from the other angle, which is also a very big contributor to peace building on how I would say this. So Juba in particular, Juba's situation is a little bit fragile. So Juba is a city that is yet in a growing process and comes out from a war that has been devastating it for almost 8 years. And when you look at Juba's situation in South Sudan's context at large, it is basically a place whereby there was war around tribal lines. So just maybe like Kenya, but here is a little bit different, that it is really about tribes. And this has caused a lot of disunity amongst people. And when I arrived, I was like, okay, what can we do to see that I can get different people working on one thing? It was a little bit tricky because really you can't get this tribe and this tribe to collaborate on one thing. It gets a little bit disturbing because you realize that they have a lot of difference together than the similarity that could bring them together. But I was super amazed when I came in and we use OpenStreetMap, which is an open collaborative space that anyone, regardless of your race, regardless of your nature, you can be able to contribute it to solve particular problems. So when I came in and joined the community, we began doing a few mapathons. And I realized that by collaborating and bringing a lot of people into this whole open source environment, I realized it was actually giving more meaning, and the value to it was getting more extent than just us building maps. But I realized we were building people. We were building people who at some one point was building a map that could help people. So it became a very big fundamental stuff for me. So we have mapathons, bring in people. And in those cases, we realize people forget about their differences. They look at what brings them together. And that is a task that has been created. And the task is for us to map buildings and roads to see that they get mapped. And this data to be used to solve people in different places. And like recently, actually, what my team is working on is on a task of WOW. So WOW is like in the Baragazal region that so many people from our side, from the Central Equatorial side don't come from. But we realize that even in the task that comes from Baragazal, we have Equatorians being in, we have different kind of people all participating to see that they map WOW, which is amazing to me. It has done a very great thing. Different people talking about the different place, South Sudanese, and it to me has done a very great thing in doing that. And in the side apart from the side they're all contributing towards the mapping, that data that they were mapping actually is to be given to humanitarian agencies to see that they solve some of the issues that are happening within those particular places. And just like we are working together with another organization called YIDA to map a place called Western Equatoria, and we are having all these big contributions to see that we get that data and can be given to humanitarian agencies who can use the same data in resolving some of the conflicts that are happening there. So you realize that open source tools are really playing a very big fundamental. And the fact that they are free, the fact that QGIS can actually be free, the fact that some of these applications are free for people, it comes in a situation to solve one of the biggest instances that are happening within peace building structures. And that is the access in terms of monetary support on how to even purchase applications as such that could be very fundamental in these things. During peace building issues, we have a lot of excuses. One of the excuses is that, hey, there is no money. There's no money for us to do this. There's no money for us to build this. There's no money for us to build that, because minus peace building, we openly know that there's a lot of profits happening. People get that, but the local money is suffering. But the fact that people can have access to these tools free of charge, people can be able to contribute to them. It brings a lot of solution in terms of the peace building process. I have also worked with a tool known as Audacity. Audacity is an open audio tool. We use it a lot in solving community and simple conflicts in the refugee camp. So what we do is we train people on the use of those tools, just an audio editing tool, but there's a lot of power in audio that happens in the refugee camp, whereby people come and talk themselves, they record podcasts about their own problems in their homes, they solve them, and they're able to share this little podcast with a lot of other different people. And this one has helped a lot in solving very miniature problems in refugee camps. And it has helped to bring people together, as well as to get, and why it became more successful is because it's free. Audacity is free. It's just a matter of downloading it and having it in your computer, and you train people. It's free of charge. All these aspects and tools have contributed a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Romeo, for that. I'm hearing a lot in terms of build people, not build in the process of building the technology and improving the technology. But just to play a bit of devil's advocate when it comes to the actual use of these tools and the environment in which they're applied, these are often low-tech environments. We talk of poor limited connectivity, no poor network, interrupted or limited electricity supply. And so maybe we can hear a bit more from John and the Unahakika project in how, as the Sentinel project, as part of the Unahakika initiative, how are you navigating the barriers that hinder the use or the adoption of open source apps and tools in very practical kind of fields, implementation environments. So John, over to you.
Thank you so much, Monica, and the other presenters. Yeah, so I'll just talk briefly about Unahakika, the project that we've deployed in Kenya and other parts of East Africa, which started way down in Tana River County after the massacre that had occurred there. And it involved touring communities, the Pokomo who are farmers, and Orma pastoralists. The mission of Sentinel Project as an organization that deploys Unahakika is to assist communities faced by mass atrocities through direct cooperation with the communities in Hansway and the deployment of technology. And whenever we go to the ground to reach out to the communities in order to assist them, we consider technologies that are very much available at the grassroots level. And so with the Unahakika initiative, we are using SMS platform, though it is plugged into Wikirumors, which is an open source software platform that enable us to map and visualize rumors as they are posted through the SMS system. We are able to do the analysis on Wikirumors and also visualization of the mapping. And after verifying these rumor reports, we are able now to report back to the communities with accurate information. And the good thing about this is the use of this data, we are able to analyze timely information and support decision-making at grassroots level to avoid maybe reoccurrence of more violence, because rumors can lead to more tension. Rumors sometimes cause a lot of mistrust among the community members, and that would consequently lead to violence. So we're also able to provide situational analysis where community members are able to understand probably what is happening. Like in the case of South Sudanese refugees in Uganda, we're able to inform them about what is happening in South Sudan, different from maybe the rumors they hear circulating within the refugee camps. At the same time, we are able also to do some prediction of incidences, where through mapping of this, we are able now to know probably where the next village that these rumors will go from where the circulation is. And all this is also done with the help of a trained team of community ambassadors who are now the human face of the project, because with the remote settings and low infrastructured areas, then you cannot just have a full-fledged technology-based platform that you hope to assist the communities. So our project is kind of hybrid. We tie in the human aspect and also the technology. So all these have proved to be very relevant to the local communities, because over the years we've seen improvement And our main goal is to ensure that we change people's attitudes towards rumors and misinformation, so that in the long run, people learn to question any rumor they hear or any information they hear. And that's why we dubbed the project Unahakika, such that community members will be able to question every rumor they hear or misinformation that is traversing the village. Back to you, Monica.
Oh, thank you, John, for that. And I'll take us back to Daniel a bit to hear more as a continuation on what John mentioned in terms of a hybrid approach, where we're using both technology and the non-technology approaches. So from an Ushahidi perspective, how are open source apps and tools bridging that gap between warning and response? So early warning and response, or bridging the gap between, for example, preparedness and response in any kind of situational analysis.
Thank you, Monica. So I think at Ushahidi, it's been pretty clear from the start that at the heart of all deployments that we support or that we actually work with and build ourselves is the community. And by getting a pulse of what takes place on a day-to-day in marginalized communities, we're able to get the actual situation on ground. So what happens is we endeavor to make sure that all the decision makers are fully aware, and we close that gap by trying to deploy low-tech technology to be able to capture feedback from these communities. And we relay this on to decision makers together with our partners. An example is what we've done, for example, with Uchaguzi deployments in Kenya, where we try to monitor what's happening during the elections, make sure that we have a situation room where we bring together not only civil society organizations or other stakeholders involved within the election process, but also we try to make sure that law enforcement is within reach. And this is a form of, say, early warning and making sure that, in case there's any scenario that happens within these vulnerable communities, we're able to see, action that is taken quite rapidly and within time to make sure that, there is limited danger. So I think that's basically our approach, by making sure that we bring together the partnerships to make sure that any information or reports that are received using the platform can be able to be directed towards the persons who are best placed to be able to respond. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And just speaking to low technology kind of variations that require less bandwidth, less connectivity. I'd like to hear, maybe we can hear a bit more from Solomon when it comes to the actual innovative environments where we develop these open source apps, where we curate kind of code to improve them before we deploy them. What are some of the experiences when it comes to whether you deploy a low-tech tool, or whether you actually need to deploy a hybrid tool that involves different integrations from a technology perspective? So when it comes to technology development, how are you bridging the gap between what serves the warning aspect of any situation and what's really efficient when it comes to response?
All right, so I think the first thing for us to understand, I will pick an example from, again, back to the settlements. We worked a lot with the refugee settlements. And while designing, we came up with a design challenge that would require several people to innovate around conflict resolution and peace building. And I think the most important thing that we need to understand is that while we are building this, we are working with the people in those specific areas. If we say we are building tools for peace building, conflict resolution, and all those, if we say we are going to sit in the comfort of our offices and innovate around this and build something, we cannot make anything serious. any serious impact. So first of all, we went to this settlement and we said, let's interact with these guys and let them come up with the solutions, while we guide them on how to come up with those apps and tools that they feel can be helpful in that area. So what we saw coming up in those with respect to that was that in the first place, like John mentioned, it's more of use of SMS. Now, if we use SMS, you find the kind of platforms, I mean the kind of gadgets that they use are more of like the feature phones. Very few people have smartphones, and now when you look at that, we see ourselves having more impact and having that get to as many people as possible. Now, these are solutions that were built together with the refugees, looking at what they have available at their disposal. So SMS usage was one. Then the other thing that we saw coming up was to look at things around mobilization in that settlement, or in the different settlements. They do not have only the feature phones. There are a few people, and you find that they have leaders within those settlements and the communities around. So we have specific points. So you look at specific points where these people can gather to have information, counseling related to trying to get them come together and dialogue. So those are the two aspects I would be looking at. The tools that would involve use of SMS, and also actually we also had one that did not. There are those that you can have which may not really require you to be offline completely, but again, even when you do not have connectivity, you're able to access. That means it gives room for minimal connectivity. So now that takes us to three groups, three categories. So the baseline here is we need to involve those guys. They have solutions that fit within their communities. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you very much. And just before we proceed, I'd like us to jump to responding to, I see two key questions from our audience today. So I'm just going to quickly allow us to respond to those questions. And I'll read the first question is, let me just read it, Mauricio. So although open source apps and tools are indeed opening up collaboration in crisis response and peace building, what are the safeguards we ought to establish as a community of practice to avoid interoperability issues that might bring about human suffering and death, as data flows generated are used for critical decision making? And the second bit of that question is really, do we think that the standards are sufficient, or should we work as a community of practice towards standards that are very specific to the needs of crisis response and crisis building? So I'm going to probably start off with John from an implementation perspective. What do you think of the standards, the safeguards that are put in place when it comes to these technologies that are out there?
Thank you, Monica. That's a very good question. And I would say from our own experience on the ground, we've been faced with these kinds of challenges where, for example, a rumor comes in about a killing of a person, and the rumor spreads across, and you want to dispel this rumor as true to a community from targeting a community that is aggrieved. So it becomes a question of how sensitive you are when handling this information, and also how targeted you are supposed to be when now dispelling back this information. So for example, one time we received a rumor about people from the Pokomo community who are farmers having been killed by the Orma community. The information was true. And we were supposed to dispel this rumor as true back to the community, let them understand that truly this thing happened. But then we're also supposed to think about how to package our information back to the community to avoid, number one, spreading this information further, and number two, causing more harm. So what we normally do is to make sure that we ensure that we also go ahead and add more to the information. So for example, we'll say it's true, someone from community X has been killed by someone from community Y, but there is an action that has been taken by the authorities. Probably the perpetrator has been arrested, and we also go ahead and urge the local community members to maintain peace as the matter is being resolved by the authorities. So it's a matter of how sensitive as an implementer of the program you are, and how much you are able to target this program, and also how responsive you are. Are you going to take so long to respond to these kinds of questions and now allow even more consequences in terms of the effect of that rumor, or are you going to respond in a very timely manner? Thank you.
Thank you, John, for weighing in on that. Romeo, any thoughts or additions to the question on safeguarding the kind of the effects of some of these technologies and how to establish a proper community of practices to avoid issues that might bring about death and suffering?
Yeah, so sorry. So for me, what technically maybe I'll just try to add up is the fact that these technologies are really coming in place. Of course, yeah, we shall have the risk about that, but I believe we should be having a strategy, more especially apart from just being users, maybe the creators of the technology, first of all, like these apps, the people that are going to be the users of the technology. We should be able to really try as much as possible to sieve in and get very informed people around it. Because honestly speaking, it's the same question I got one time on the radio when we were talking about OpenStreetMap, and I was like, this is an open collaborative thing and all that. And someone was like, okay, if it's open and everyone really can come in, what are your strategies in such a way that someone just won't come in and begin mapping things wrongly each and everywhere? Because it's open, anyone can be there. And anyone can actually use it for their own damage and harm. So I feel like there were, like for us, the chances that actually we have realized that such kind of stuff to be there. And one is for us to accept that, yes, these tools, if they land in hands of people that will love to use them for malice or stuff, and at the end of it, defy our data quality on how we would love to use for response of something, is going to affect and of course cause people to suffer. But one thing I wanted to talk about is maybe better, apart from the fact of usage, we should make sure that we have a validation section, right? Like we should be able to validate some of this data. So our community that we should be getting a community of practice that should be either using when implementing some of the things that come out from this should be people who are kind of well informed. That's the same way like how we do in the side of mapping. Before you get into mapping, we have to train you. We have to understand that, yes, you're going to use this because of that, so that you're able to understand what you're doing. But if not, of course, there are chances like that. So it comes back to us again. Even though whatever app you're going to use, please try to get people informed around it and be aware that, yes, that's going to be. So even the side of rumors, yes, there's someone who may post in a rumor that doesn't exist, that's not real, that's not that. But you must have a better way on how you have a community that can outpower that and be able to come in and counter some kind of information like that. So I believe since we're all a community, it's all about building a community that is well informed to do that. I can see John has a hand up, so maybe he wants to say something.
Yes, great. John, I didn't see your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just to add 1 minute, I forgot to mention data protection, how we protect our subscribers. So we ensure that this information is not accessible by other parties without the consent of the reporters. And sometimes we work with the government. For example, the government can ask us about a specific rumor spreading across space and time. Then we are also reporting as Sentinel project and not as that specific user who reported the information. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Daniel, when it comes to data validation and ground truthing, what are some of the ways that Ushahidi is employing to ensure that standards are adhered within communities that can be local, but also global at the same time for a given response situation, for example?
Yeah, thank you, Monica. So perhaps I'll first start by talking about the platform before I even speak about the layers of validation that we have for information that's disseminated through the platform. So as a platform, Ushahidi takes security very seriously, and we encourage, all our deployers, both open source and enterprise, to, share any vulnerabilities that they identify or concerns. So we have a team that will verify and take necessary steps to fix it. And this is open to all users of the platform, and no matter whether they are paying users or not. And then the aspect of responsible disclosure, we always inform, the general public in case we have any vulnerabilities that are identified from our end, and we share that. So for the day-to-day users of the platform, when you talk about validation of information or reports that are received, we try to ensure that, there are multiple layers of users who are administrators on the platform who can check and just make sure that, all the content that is being received by a particular deployment is authentic. These don't necessarily have to be from Ushahidi. We work with partners on various projects, and these partners are, they're knowledgeable about the subject matters that each deployment is handling in whichever case. For the case of elections, which I'll talk about mostly, like I mentioned earlier, we usually bring on board civil society actors and also law enforcement to be able to validate and verify what's happening on the ground. Before a post gets published. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And maybe the other question that I'd like to touch on is from Patrick, and it's a comment, but also that has elicited kind of some thoughts or that we come across a lot. And it's a free and open source model has been the key to the success of, for example, the Kobo toolbox, but it was only possible because of the support of the donors. So such funding is not easily accessible to many local initiatives. And so just to start off maybe with, with Solomon, maybe you can speak a bit into how funding influences the development of open source tools and apps, and where there are gaps based off of your experience working with startups.
All right, so thank you. Again, from a developer point of view, while we support technologists to come up with tools, one of the things that we have always pointed out is that while developing the tools that we use, in most cases, we may not actually require funding from anyone. Now, the funding of these tools should not be from the development point of view, but rather in terms of doing research and all that. Yes, it's true that if we are going to be doing research and trying to improve what we are doing, then there are so many things that are involved in terms of there are several processes that will definitely require funding and also access to information. So from the side of when it comes to building a product, especially related to technology, I think we need to get down and understand that if we only fix if we only fix our minds to getting something done by, you know, and through funding, then we may not be able to achieve much. But yes, when it comes to the other research, now that now comes to support from donors, and maybe if government has initiatives that they want to, you know, fund to help move that forward. Yes, it would contribute a lot, but on the side of research, gathering information, and all that. So I would say it shouldn't be a problem. Again, it shouldn't be a problem when it comes to looking for funding for those, because I believe, and from what we have seen, we have specific initiatives that are supported by donors, and if we go to them, we know. For example, if we look at things related to, let's say we're talking about peace building, and maybe we have the UN agencies coming in. There is that wing of the UN that probably looks at such funding. So I think it goes back to how best we are solving something. We talked about in the previous discussion, we talked about things to do with ethics and looking at privacy and also security. Now, if we have tools or the process of using them, if they breach security, maybe the privacy of individuals, then we may not see funding around those. But yes, I do agree that it contributes a lot into building a product or a tool. But then there is where we can go to get that, if we have the right tools to source for that funding.
Thank you, Solomon. So I'll take us back to our last question that we wanted to weigh in on, which is around collating or bringing together data and information from crowdsourced data and information, and communicating that to national statistics offices or disaster services offices or other international agencies that are conducting response. So one of the things that kept on coming up during the discussion is collecting data and giving it to the humanitarian agencies for response. But we've often seen that can be a bit problematic, or it means that the data might be outdated, or it might not align with what these institutions have at hand. So maybe back to Daniel, how can we collate crowdsourced data with information that already exists from governments, from international agencies, to help focus conflict and involve peace-building initiatives? How do the two processes work in an everyday situational happenings?
Okay, thank you. So first off, I'll focus mostly on statistical offices whose conventional tasks are, to coordinate household surveys and censuses. So this means that they're well suited to serve as sort of like a reference point due to their ground truthing capacity. One of our previous projects actually to Shahidi was called Dispatcher, which leveraged, say machine learning to be able to match community resources with local needs. And in such an instance, if you layered this data on top of national statistical data, you might actually be able to predict humanitarian situations and even go the extra mile to improve the quality of services extended to these communities that need support in such trying times. So I think they can't be written off, but layering them or using them as a sort of baseline layer to the information that you're building can help you to, forecast any conflict or actually inform the peace building initiative that you're trying to push.
Thank you so much. And we're coming to the end of today's discussion. So as a wrap up, I'll just take one question from our audience, which is from Errol and she's interested in how open source open source software is empowering people that don't feel like they want to interact in the deep technical aspects. So I'll just leave this open. I'm not sure if Daniel or Solomon or John or Romeo, any of you would like to respond to that. How open source tools and apps are empowering people that are not really interested in the deep technical backend work that comes with these tools and technologies.
Perhaps I can go first.
Okay.
And I think the usage of open source tools, like, for example, Shahidi, OpenStreetMap, in one way or another, you're building your digital literacy versus the traditional digital literacy where you had to learn how to use spreadsheets or Word. So in one way or another, you're building your skills. And I think you don't need to actually interact with the back end for you to be able to actually use open source tools. So yeah, I think the initiatives like OpenStreetMap, you find yourself, improving the locations around yourself, mapping social services around yourself, and in one way or another, you're actually empowering your community, and without having to, interact with black screens with code.
Thank you for that. Any other reflections from the panelists?
Yeah, maybe what I would also mention is that while building tools or anything related to software and apps, what we need to consider, of course, is the design in line with what any user, the target user is going to be, how they're going to interact with the platform, what's the experience when they're going to, use these tools. So it's built with the user taken care of. So that means a user should find it very, very easy to use and should be comfortable. Should that fail to happen, then it's taken back for refinement. So that shouldn't really be a big worry when it comes to these tools.
Okay, thank you. And to wrap up, our final reflections around the pandemic. It's we're technically going into the start of the second year with the pandemic, and there's been a lot of reflections around peace building and crisis response relies a lot on kind of face-to-face interaction. So what have we learned through the global pandemic that might help organizations to still use open source apps and tools for peace building and crisis response when it has not been possible to have the face-to-face connection or to have a space for non-technology conversations or to do our end user testing? So what have we learned through that? And maybe we can start with Ronald and then John.
Yeah, so within this pandemic, one lesson that I guess we have learned is that from my end, and maybe has been a lesson that has been there for quite a while, is that quality of data is super important for making very, very, very informed decisions. And like you see, I think just a week ago, I had a meeting with the WHO in South Sudan, more especially on the preparations of how people could have access to the COVID vaccines in the country. And we're discussing around mapping out places that the WHO could be able to deliver vaccines there. And we realize that actually within this period of COVID-19, there's a lot of interdependency that needs to come in, and which of course involves as well the use of very open collaborative tools, which of course can be open source tools. So one lesson we can learn is, yeah, we just have to understand that data really gets in key, and the use of still open collaboration tools as open source really comes in and so handy, because we realize that we have to make very immediate and very, very key decisions at some one point or the other. And like everything right now is happening more, especially in a rush. And it's because everything looks like, okay, there is this problem and we have to handle this problem right now. Sometimes jumping into purchases of what is, and we know what actually takes long to get something done is a logistical part of it. And so if the logistics of things can be cut down, like the fact of using already existing open source tools, this can actually tend to increase and speed up the delivery of services, more especially within even the period of COVID. So like for us, right now, the map that we had to do were jump in, hey, we need to map this, we need to do that, we need to, and we're so easy because we're actually using open source tools. Though before we realized open source tools, like us in the mapping world and in the audio world, it's humans doing it. So of course there will be need of resources, there will be need of this happening. And of course there'll be need of funding, there'll be need of supporting of this kind of humans. It doesn't mean like it's actually completely free, but the fact that you can get access to the tools as fast as possible is great. But beyond everything, we should always put the back in our minds that it's humans working behind this, it's people. So, which I guess that could be my set of conclusion that I actually learned around it. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, what have we learned through the pandemic when it comes to the Sentinel project and Unahakika initiatives?
I think we've learned a lot, and that's why in the wake of COVID-19, we were able even to repurpose our Unahakika initiative to support people get access to accurate information in regards to COVID-19, because we noticed there was a widespread mis and disinformation spreading across time and space. Another lesson that we've learned, the need to deep dive into innovative use of data science approaches. And by that, I mean AI, ML, in supporting these kinds of initiatives that we implement on the ground. The need to ensure that these tools are also accessible. And apart from being accessible, creating awareness about them, because we have so many good tools existing, open source, but people are not aware about them. They don't know how to use them. And also there is also need to have up to the minute data, very accurate, timely, that will enable stakeholders to make the right decision. And finally, I will talk about building trust around technology, because at the end of the day, people have to trust these systems and tools for them to use them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's an apt conclusion to our session today. So the need for more advocacy, the need for building trust, and the need for getting word out there about these open source tools. Throughout the discussion, we shared a few links, Unahakika, Ushahidi. Romeo also talked about 2 tools that they're using in Juba. And so we invite you to actually engage or to use or deploy these tools in your work.